So for story time today, we are going to enjoy watching ducklings. And I am going to read to you a chapter out of our Amazing Animals book. And this one's called The Three Gray Whales, Preserving Captives of the Ice. Captives means that, like, if you're a prisoner or you can't get out of something, you're a captive. For 21 days, 3 gray whales fought for life and breath in the frozen Beaufort Sea. All around the world, television viewers watched them in pain and hope. Bone, Bonnet, and Crossbeak were 3 endangered California gray whales. They were leaving the Arctic Ocean at the end of summer and were on their way to Baja California, Mexico, to breed and winter. Feeding close to shore at Point Barrow, Alaska, they lingered too long and were surrounded by ice on October 7, 1988. That evening, an Eskimo hunter found the air-breathing sea mammals trapped about 200 yards from shore, struggling for breath in an opening in the ice. The hunter reported the plight of the whales to the biologist at the North Slope Borough Wildlife Management Department in Borough. Eskimos and white scientists thought that because of their desperate situation, perhaps the whales should be put out of their misery. Then television got hold of the story. Letters and phone calls poured in. The world wanted the 3 gray whales rescued. Eskimo hunters and scientists from the lower 48 worked together to free the whales. Using chainsaws, they began to cut a series of breathing holes leading toward open water 3 miles away. When this time-consuming effort was shown on television, 6-foot chainsaws were sent to the rescuers by concerned business people. A National Guard helicopter arrived with a 5-ton chunk of concrete to drop on the ice to make more holes with less human effort. But it didn't work. The rescuers went on sawing. As the days grew colder, the holes refroze. At their own expense, several people hopped a plane and arrived at Borough with costly de-icing equipment to keep the water from freezing. The de-icers kept the water open for the whales, and the rescuers sawed on. Then something went wrong. The whales stopped using the holes. The Eskimos got down on their bellies and talked to the whales as their ancestors had done for centuries. They urged them to use the holes. The whales seemed to understand that the men were helping them. They swam to a hole, but then turned and swam back. Then Malik, an elderly Eskimo hunter, spoke to the whales. After a while, he reported to the rescuers. "The water is too shallow," the whales are saying. The scientists took a measurement of the lagoon bottom and found that the whales were right. A shoal was blocking the escape route. The water was too shallow under the breathing holes. Urgently, the men cut holes leading around the shoal, and urgently the whales responded. They swam from one hole to the next in great excitement as they moved to the open sea. On the 18th day of the rescue attempt, the holes stretched 1.5 miles toward freedom, but the whales were growing weary. Bone, the smallest, disappeared and was never seen again. That night, a wind moved great sheets of ice toward Point Barrow and piled them in a ridge 20 feet high. It grounded the ridge on the bottom of the lagoon and cut off all escape. The next morning, when Bonnet and Crossbeak were surfacing to breathe, Malik again went to the whales. He knew they did not need to eat, for they'd been feeding in the Beaufort Sea all summer, storing fat for their long migration. But they were under stress and losing weight. They needed a friend. Day and night he remained with the gray whales, soothing them with his voice and stroking their ice-torn noses with his hands. The rescuers sawed on toward the ridge while National Guard helicopters brought more supplies. Meanwhile, television watchers around the world turned on their sets each morning to see if the whales were still alive. The President of the United States was watching too. At the White House's direction, the Air Force assigned a C-5A Galaxy, a freight plane, to ferry more equipment to Burrow. Then the Soviet Union responded. The Cold War enemy of the United States announced that 2 Soviet icebreakers 300 miles from Burrow were on their way to help the whales. Encouraged, the American rescuers sawed furiously forward, trying to reach the ridge in time to meet the Soviet icebreakers. Again, the whales stopped swimming. This time the men knew why. Shallow water. Since they were only 500 feet from the ridge, they cut a big pool for the whales and went back to town to rest and wait for the Soviets. Only Malak stayed with the whales all night, stroking and calming them. In the darkness of the morning, on October 26th, the rescue crew returned to watch the Soviet icebreakers cut a path through the ridge as if it were butter. The whales bolted for open water. Cheers went up, and it was reported that the whales were free. But they were not. The path to freedom was jammed with broken ice. The whales could not surface to breathe. They came back to the last hole. Once more the Soviets cut through the ice. The whales moved, but went the wrong way. They returned to the hole and thrust their heads above water. Malak talked to them, pointed to them in the right direction, and gave them a shove. With that, Bonnet and Crossbeak rose halfway out of the water, then dove and disappeared. At last, the whales were free. Oh, that was kind of a stressful story. Just think, all those people came together so that they could help those whales. That is an awesome story. So tomorrow, we're going to read about Sugar, who is a cross-country traveler, and I believe Sugar is a cat, but you'll have to see. I hope that you enjoyed watching the ducks have some playtime while you were listening to the story today, and we will keep showing you our cute little additions to our house. Thanks for listening, second graders.